Alright, so I've been using the Infinix Note 50 Pro as my main phone for the past 2 months, and I've got a lot of thoughts. I basically brushed it off as just another budget phone, but this thing actually surprised me. In some ways, it really does punch above its weight, and I was thoroughly impressed. I've put it through real everyday use, photos, calls, binging Netflix, and even a few intense gaming sessions. So if you're thinking about buying the Note 50 Pro, or just curious as to how this phone stacks up over time, stick around. This is not your typical spec sheet review. I'm breaking down everything that actually matters after the honeymoon phase is well over. But before we do dive into the nitty gritty, here's a quick look at what this phone is packing, just so you know what kind of beast that we're dealing with. You've got a really big 6.7-inch AMOLED display with a smooth 144Hz refresh rate. That's flagship tier fluidity on a phone that costs under $500. Under the hood, it's running the MediaTek Helio G100 Ultimate chip. It's not the flashiest name, but trust me, we'll talk about how it holds up in a bit. You also get 8 to 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage, which honestly, that's pretty insane at this price. Camera wise, it's rocking a 50 megapixel main sensor, a couple of sidekick lenses, and a 32 megapixel front camera, which sounds like influencer bait, but I'll show you some real results soon. And yeah, a 5000 milliamp hour battery with 90 watt fast charging. That combo alone tells you that this phone can go the distance. So on paper, it's giving you the kind of checklist that usually shows up on phones nearly double the price. But honestly, paper specs and real world usage can tell very different stories. So let's break it all down. Now first, let's talk about the design, because honestly, this thing doesn't look or feel like a budget phone. First off, it has a glass back, aluminum frame, but when it comes to the whole finish and its look, it's this frosted matte texture that actually feels pretty premium. No tacky gloss, no cheap plasticky vibe, and from a distance, you'd probably guess that this is a premium phone. It's got this squared off, very boxy design with sharp edges, and it really helps me with grip. It's about 198 grams, so yeah, it's got some weight to it, but it's balanced very well. Doesn't really feel too top heavy or awkward to hold for long sessions. USB-C at the bottom, JBL speaker grill, mic, and on the side, you've got the volume rockers and the power button. Now, as far as the scanner, it's very snappy. Not flagship level ultrasonic magic, but fast enough to the point where you won't even think about it. You can just tap and go. Another thing that you'll notice is that the camera module on the back is pretty big. It's got this gold trim around the edges that gives it a bit of a high-end look. So yeah, wobbles on a flat surface are a thing. Also, if I had to nitpick, I say that this is definitely a phone that you'll want to use with a case. Not because it's fragile, but because the finish is smooth and could slip out of your hand if you're not too careful. It also has a very low IP rating, so don't go testing it near the sink. But overall, for the price, it punches well above its class in design. Next up, let's talk about the display, because this is where the Note 50 Pro quietly flexes a little bit. You're getting a 6.78-inch AMOLED panel with a 144Hz refresh rate, and honestly, this screen is one of the phone's biggest wins. The colors are punchy, the blacks are deep, and even though it's not the brightest panel on the planet, it holds up surprisingly well outdoors. I've used it under direct sunlight, replying to messages, and even watching YouTube, and yeah, it's still pretty visible. Not flagship level bright, but totally usable without winning. And when it comes to the 144Hz refresh rate, it's not just for show. Scrolling through Instagram, Twitter, and even the settings menu is very smooth, like properly smooth. The chip can actually keep up with the refresh rate most of the time, which is pretty impressive for the price. Watching content is also super solid. I watched a few Netflix episodes and a couple of YouTube videos back to back, and the AMOLED really shows its strengths with those inky blacks and contrast heavy scenes. Your viewing angles are also decent. No weird color shifting or fade when you tilt the phone, even while gaming or watching with someone next to you. So yeah, it may not be a flagship level panel, but if your daily routine includes scrolling, watching content, or reading outdoors, this display can deliver. Now moving on to the part where most people are secretly worried about: performance. Because let's be real, all those specs mean nothing if the phone starts lagging after a week of use. Now again, the Note 50 Pro runs on the MediaTek Helio G100 Ultimate chip. My version is paired with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. And when using it every day in real life, It's actually pretty solid for regular everyday stuff, WhatsApp, Instagram, and I usually keep a bunch of Chrome tabs open, watching a video while texting someone. It holds up without breaking a sweat. App switching is smooth most of the time. You might feel a little delay if you're bouncing between heavier apps, but nothing that truly ruins the experience. Now, when it comes to gaming, I've tried Call of Duty Mobile and even Asphalt 9 just to push. It runs COD Mobile with maxed out settings pretty fine. No HDR option here, but still decent. Gameplay is very smooth for the most part, though you see minor frame dips if you're in very action heavy moments or just playing for more than 30 minutes straight. Again, it runs very well, but as expected, not flagship level buttery. When it comes to the thermals, they're surprisingly well handled. Even after 45 minutes of gaming, it gets warm but never uncomfortably hot. Like lukewarm to notice, but not enough to freak out or need a break. But one thing I did notice though is that over the past week, there's a slight stutter when pulling down the notification shade with heavy background apps. It's not a deal breaker, but definitely worth pointing out. So overall, if you're a casual user or even a light to moderate gamer, this phone can easily handle your everyday needs without choking. You're not going to get flagship level speed, but for the price, it's actually doing way better than I expected. Alright, now let's talk about cameras, because Infinix is really pushing the 50 megapixel main camera as a big headline feature. And look, I've tested it in every single condition that you can think of, and here's what I found. In daylight, the main sensor actually does a decent job, like shockingly good for the price. The photos come out sharp, colors are a bit boosted, but also in a way that looks nice on Instagram, so no complaints there. As far as dynamic range, of course it's not pixel level, but it doesn't completely blow out the sky or crush shadows like some other phones have in this range. Now, low light is actually where the reality really kicks in. Without night mode, the shots are noisy and detail takes a serious hit, but flip on super night mode and things do get a little bit brighter. Though you still get some softness, it's usable, but I don't expect miracles. Think of it more like good enough for quick photos at dinner, but maybe not something that you like to print out. Selfie camera is a 32 megapixel sensor and it's okay. Great in daylight, skin tones are decent. When it comes to my selfies at night, they kind of look horrible and make me look orange. But when it comes to everyday daylight selfies, I think it does a pretty solid job. Kind of the definition of mid. Not too great, but also not bad either. On the video side, it maxes out at 1440p at 60 frames per second. The footage looks alright in daylight, shaky if you're walking, and can remind you of the price. Audio quality is fine, nothing special, and night video is grainy and something that you do not want to rely on. So in short, if you're buying this for social media pics and good lighting, you're covered. It's not a camera phone in the true sense, but for the price, you'll get more than enough usable shots for Instagram, stories, or even a few TikToks. Just don't expect it to replace your mirrorless or your flagship. Now, okay, battery life. This is one of the areas where the Note 50 Pro genuinely shines. Not only are you getting a 5000 milliamp hour battery, but you're also getting it with the super power efficient chip. And this thing easily lasts me a full day, and I'm not talking about light use. I'm on social media a lot, watching YouTube, clicking photos, and gaming here and there, and still I've consistently ended my day with around 20 to 25% battery left. My average on-screen time has been hovering around 7 to 8 hours, which is honestly fantastic for this price point. So if you're a light user, just calling, messaging, and the occasional browsing, you can stretch it to a day and some change very easily. And as for charging, the Infinix gives you a 90 watt fast charger in the box. It takes the phone from 0 to 100% in about 38 minutes, which is insanely fast, especially when compared to the Galaxy, which is the fastest in the US, and that charges from to 100% in about 50 minutes. It also has pretty fast wireless charging at 30 watts, and this is what I use the most. So whenever I'm charging overnight, I use my wireless charger, and again, it's always on 100% by the time I wake up. But whenever I forget to charge my phone at night, all I have to do is use the 90 watt charger, and again, it's to 100% in no time. But other than the charging, I haven't really noticed any weird battery drain or heating while charging either, which is always a good sign. Background app management is decent. It doesn't really kill off any apps aggressively, but it also doesn't let them eat up your battery quietly in the background, which is a solid balance. So yeah, battery life, no complaints. It's reliable, efficient, and exactly what I was hoping for in a phone that's meant to last you through the day without any stress. Now that we talked about the battery, let's talk about the software, because, well, that's where a lot of these budget phones can get pretty sketchy. Now, the Note 50 Pro runs on XOS 15, which is based in Android 15, and the overall look of the UI is pretty clean. Definitely not as cluttered as some other budget phones that I've used. You've got your usual apps like camera and messaging, but then there are a few pre-installed off-the-wall ones that you might not need. Not a ton of junk, but still, when compared to all of the phones in the US that I've used, it's still much more. And that's a very small annoyance if you're usually into a totally minimal setup. Now, in terms of fluidity, XOS is decent. Swiping around, scrolling through apps, and multitasking is smooth most of the time. There are occasional stutters when jumping between apps, but nothing that completely ruined my experience. But if you've used stock Android like on the Pixel 9 or even the 9 Pro, you'll notice that it's not quite as fluid as those. But one thing that you'll have to deal with though, ads. Yeah, Infinix has been known to push ads in places like the settings apps, and occasionally you'll see some pop-up notifications, but nothing crazy, but it's there. So if you're the type of person who hates ads, this could be a deal breaker, and I recommend checking out other options like the Realme or Redmi phones, which tend to have cleaner software. Now, about updates. Infinix isn't exactly known for being the fastest with Android updates. You'll get security patches, but major OS updates not as reliable as other brands like Samsung or even OnePlus. In fact, Infinix promised 2 years of security updates, which is decent for the price, but don't expect any major Android version updates regularly. But it's also still a little disappointing for those who are looking for longevity. So overall, the software experience is fine. It's clean enough for daily use, but not without its quirks, especially with ads and the occasional stutter. Next up, let's talk about the connectivity and some of the extras that make the Note 50 Pro a more complete package. First up, we have the 4G connection. For most of us, 4G is still the bread and butter. I'm particularly not a fan of 5G, and I feel like it's overhyped, especially in the US. But besides that, the 4G is pretty good. Calls are clear, signal reception is strong in urban areas, and you won't be dropping any calls every other minute. Moving on to Wi-Fi, I've had zero issues connecting to my home network. It supports dual band Wi-Fi, so whether I'm on 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz, I haven't noticed any dropouts or lag. Even when streaming, I haven't noticed any dropouts or lags even when streaming 4K content. The Bluetooth is also very smooth, pairing with headphones, speakers, and even my smartwatch has been quick and hassle-free. The GPS performance has been spot on. Whether I'm using Google Maps or any other navigation app, the phone locks onto my location quickly and accurately, which really surprised me since I'm in a country where this phone can't even be sold. So if you're navigating through traffic or trying to find that new restaurant, you won't be left hanging. Haptics are decent, not as satisfying as what you get on a more premium phone, but they do the job for things like typing and notifications. And as far as security, you've got Face Unlock and the fingerprint sensor. The fingerprint reader is quick, though not lightning fast, and the Face Unlock is accurate, but sometimes can struggle in low light conditions. Neither feature will let you down, but they're not really perfect. So after 2 months of use, the Infinix Note 50 Pro is a solid budget phone that definitely punches above its weight in a few areas. Battery life and display quality are its biggest strengths. Whether you're watching videos, scrolling through social media, or gaming, it holds up really well. And the 50 megapixel camera is surprisingly good in daylight. But again, just like every other phone on the market, it's not without its drawbacks. Software ads, occasional stuttering, and the lack of updates may be deal breakers for some, and it's very clear that Infinix is focused on offering value for money, but they've made a few compromises to keep that price down. So if you're on a tight budget and your priorities are battery life, a big screen, and a good enough performance, the Note 50 Pro is a great option. However, if you care about software updates, a flawless camera experience, or if you're looking for a super smooth AI, this may not be your best bet. So in the end, it really depends on what you're after. But overall, this phone is a solid value for what it offers, and I'm really enjoying it after 2 months of use. This